First round of the Candidates 2016, the tournament which will determine the challenger of the world champion Magnus Carlsen. It started today, 8 players are competing, and I'm going to take a look at the game between Viswanathan Anand and Veselin Topalov. So let's dive right into it. Anand with the white pieces started out with e4, and Topalov is going for the Berlin defense here after bishop b5, knight f6, the notorious weapon the black players used to, well, to not let white players enjoy e4 anymore. Let's put it like this. This is the reason why a lot of people are not playing 1e4 anymore, because it's just a wall, the Berlin wall, and there's no way to break through. So here in this game, Anand isn't going for the famous endgame which arises after castle, but he goes for the anti-Berlin with d3. And this is more or less now a typical Rai Lopez position. Castle, d6. There's also a move knight d4 here, which used to be very popular. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure why Topalov didn't play it, or maybe it's not as fashionable anymore. Not quite sure. I think it's also a very reasonable choice. But so is d6. I think it's just a matter of taste. c3, castle, knight bd2, and here a very typical maneuver. Knight e7. Bring the knight to the king's side. The only downside, it allows d4, but black allows this and creates some imbalance. Black could also play another move here. Of course, there are many moves here. To play h6, probably a6 is also fine, rook e8, many options. So knight e7, let's look at what Topalov did, allowing d4. And black gives up the center and just hopes to attack the center later. Bishop b6. Also notice the slightly awkward position of the knight on d2 now. The knight would much rather be on c3, on d2 it's just in the way of the bishop. Rook e1 and bishop g4, and the white position continues to be a little bit awkward. For example, now white would like to play this typical maneuver, bring the knight over, knight f1, knight g3 maybe, but that wouldn't be a good idea because black could take on f3 and white would need to take back with the pawn, which is not great. You want to keep your pawn structure in front of your king intact, and you don't want any disruption, so no double pawns in front of your king. Because if white takes with the queen, then this pawn on d4 is hanging. So I just want to point this out once again. White has obtained something, has obtained the center, but at the same time his pieces are not coordinating very well quite yet. h3, always a useful move to play in order to just ask this bishop to retreat and create some space for the king just in the long run, so you don't get back rank checkmate. Now a4, white is expanding on the queen side a little bit, also asking this bishop what he's going to do. Obviously there's not a threat to trap the bishop, and notice that black cannot take on d4. Another advantage why white played h3, because now white could play g4 and unpin this knight on f3. And if the bishop moves, then white could take on d4. And you might say, well, black could sacrifice the knight here and get 3 pawns as compensation for the piece after h takes g4, bishop takes g4. But white doesn't have to take the knight, but can take the bishop immediately already, because now it's in fact this knight who's in a pin and not the other way around. And white is doing really well here. So in the game, Topalov just played a6, bishop f1, the bishop just drops all the way back, getting out of the way. Very typical as well to just come back into action when it's necessary and not at the moment hinder any other pieces. Rook e8, a5, bishop a7, and now queen b3. Still, we have this slightly awkward position here with the knight and the bishop. The knight still doesn't know where to go yet. But for now, Anand brings out the queen. And also is threatening, maybe, to take on b7, which Topalov ignores, plays knight c6. Topalov could have now played rook b8, but maybe it was not to his taste, maybe it was a little bit too passive. And he liked knight c6, which is a decent move. And here Anand goes for a slightly risky path, I would say. He could have defended this pawn on d4 by playing rook a4, which is a move I quite like, honestly. I always like these rook swings, rook to a3, rook to a4, bringing this rook into action. And really keeping the center as it is. And now rook b8, black should defend the pawn here. Now bishop d3, and we can go from here. White might be a tiny bit better, but still has to untangle the knight on d2 and the bishop on c1. Instead, Anand played d5, knight d4, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, and now took the pawn b7. And in the press conference afterwards he said, if I don't take the bait here, the pawn on b7, then all my pieces just look stupid, and that's very true. So he reasoned, my piece may still look stupid, but at least I have a pawn for their stupid look. But this is quite risky. It might be objectively fine for white, but it is risky. Knight d7, good move. Why is that? The knight comes to c5, where it's quite well placed, but also, more importantly, the queen is coming out and can come to f6 or h4 and suddenly ask some very unpleasant questions to this guy here on f2. And indeed, that's the current threat. If white was to just remove the queen from b7, come back to b3, then queen h4, and how do you defend this pawn? There's only one reasonable way, which is g3, but notice that now queen f6, and now there is no reasonable way anymore. White has to give up in exchange by playing rook e3, and then obviously black is clearly better. Notice that if black plays queen f6 right away, then there would be still queen g3 in a position to defend the pawn. So this is why black plays queen h4 first to provoke g3, and then white doesn't have this option anymore. And Anand played a mistake here. He played knight c4, and he could have been in serious trouble after this move. The best move is rook a3, but this is already difficult to find, I think. The idea is that now after queen h4, indeed white wants to give the exchange, but on better terms, because white keeps the active queen on b7. And now black could take on e3, but black doesn't quite want to alleviate the pressure yet, and can always take on e3 later too. So maybe knight c5 is best here, queen c6, and now f5, continuing to build up pressure in very unclear position. I would rather be black, but it seems to be around equal, maybe a tiny bit better for white. But practically speaking, quite a difficult task here for white. So let's see what Anand did. He played knight c4, which makes a lot of sense, finally freeing the bishop on c1, and now if queen h4 or queen f6, there are always ways to defend the pawn on f2. But now knight c5, queen c6, and the queen is not very comfortably placed here. On the one hand, the queen is keeping an eye on the pawn on a6 and the pawn on c7, but you might notice the queen doesn't have any squares left. So when I actually saw this position, I immediately thought, well, the only thing black has to do is get a bishop to either d7 or e8. And in fact, this is the best thing black can do, even though it's slow. Played a very ugly move at first, f6, but the idea is so strong that black can allow to play this ugly move. The idea is to play rook e7 followed by bishop e8 and just picking up the queen, and there's not much white can do. White can just try to get the most out of losing the queen, which is bishop e3. Now bishop takes e3. Oh, excuse me. If rook e7, then white could get out here by sacrificing knight on d6. And after c takes d4, bishop takes d4, bishop e8. Now this square is available and white saves the queen. So Instead, black takes on e3, rook takes, and now rook e7. Still no way out for the queen, so b4 best way to get some material for the queen. But we have this position, and white has a rook and a minor piece, and certainly chances to hold this, but we have to be clear here, it's only black playing for a win, and black might have very decent chance to win this. So this was the way to go for Topalov. There was also another very interesting move here, which is the move bishop takes f2, with the idea king takes f2 and queen h4 check. Now g3 is forced, otherwise the rook is dropping on e1 if the king moves. And now knight takes e4 check. White has to give the rook here, otherwise white is just going to be mated, let's be honest. So rook takes e4, queen takes e4. And this is quite unclear. Knight e3, white has to defend here, but in the process gives up a few more pawns here, quite a bit. All the pawns in front of the king. But on the other hand, white has kind of coordinated, brings the rook into action, and very unclear position. Certainly black is also not worse here, probably a little bit better. So those were two attractive options. I really liked f6, and seemed very natural to me too. But instead, Topalov chose to remove this very strong knight on c5 and played knight b3. Rook b1 now exchanged the bishop on c1 to get the bishop pair, but this just allowed white to get his piece into play and get out of this slightly uncomfortable position with his queen on c6. Here knight takes c1 was also an inaccuracy. Instead, f5 would have been a better choice. Asking his pawn on e4 some questions. White cannot take because the rook is loose on e1. So white has to go e5 and now take on c1 and then take on e5. Still, it seems that white is also better here after knight e3, hitting both c7 and f5, but certainly this is giving black a better position than in the game. So instead, Topalov took on c1, rook takes c1, rook b8, getting the rook into action. But white just takes another pawn, and now white is up 2 pawns. Black, of course, has some compensation with the very strong bishop on d4, but 2 pawns is already quite a lot. So it seems that black has sacrificed too much here. Queen h4, instead f5 was another move, once again to open up the position here in the center a little bit. But just rook c2, f takes e4, knight e3. White can give back a pawn just to consolidate, make sure his position is solid, and protect everything. It looks pretty good for white. In all these positions, the pawn on a4 is just a huge trump, because already far advanced and can go to a6 where it is protected by the bishop. Instead, Topalov played queen h4. Now rook c2, white is this time able to just defend the pawn on f2 quite easily. Rook takes e4, now a very strong move, knight e3, which just keeps everything protected. If white was to exchange the rooks on e4 and queen takes e4, hitting the rook, hitting the pawn, black would be back in business. So Anand didn't want to do this, but instead knight e3. Also having some ideas here, maybe knight f5, and rook takes c7 suddenly in the position. White is pretty much winning here. But a game ain't over until it's over, right? So of course Topalov fought on here. Queen d8, avoiding any knight f5, also protecting pawn c7, but at the same time quite a passive move. So it's already telling that it's white who has defended and is now obtaining the initiative. Queen c4, strong move once again, just pinning this bishop, and the bishop, well, can't move because the rook on e4 would be hanging. Bishop g6, protecting a rook on e4, so bishop takes e3 is in a position now, but now bishop d3, threatening the rook. Rook f4. And here, bishop takes g6 is fine. Instead, g3 would have been also quite a natural move, because the rook is running out of squares, right? Or rather, running out of squares where it can still protect the bishop on d4. It seems queen g5 is necessary, but now white can pick up another pawn on c7, rook f8, and now exchange bishops. Now simply king h2, and white is up 2 pawns, everything is protected. This is over. Instead, Anand took on g6, h takes g6, g3 now, rook e4, and here, from here on, Anand needed 2 more accurate moves and it would have been over. Really. But instead he played naturally, but not the strongest way. He played a6, makes a lot of sense to push this pawn forward, but the pawn is still stopped by this bishop. And right now was a chance for white to exploit this pin on the 4th rank by playing rook d1. Makes a lot of sense, right? Attack the pin piece, common rule. The question is though, how to continue after queen f6, and here's the difficult move. Very strong prophylactic move white can play right here. And in fact, if you want to, you can stop the video right now and try to figure this out. Try to figure out what Anand probably didn't figure out, because if he saw this move here, he would have gone for it. And I already gave you a huge hint because I told you it's a prophylactic move. And the move is king g2. And king g2 has a lot of purposes. For one, going out of this diagonal, and also preventing queen f3 ideas, and then creating this threat knight g4, which is really unpleasant because then black cannot defend the bishop on d4 anymore. And really the best thing black can do here is sacrifice the exchange rook takes e3, but this is just not sufficient, because if rook b8, which is the natural move black would like to play to protect the rook on e4, then knight g4 leaves black in a hopeless situation. No way to keep protecting bishop on d4. So that would have been the best way to continue this game. Instead, Anand played a6. Queen e8 now, protecting a rook on e4. Now suddenly we have these threats again. Bishop takes e3 and so on. And Anand defends against this by playing rook c2. Instead, queen takes c7 might have been a better choice. I can understand why Anand didn't want to go for this, because it really opens up the king, but at the same time white has this very strong pawn on a6. Not easy to convert here, but it seems white is still winning in this position. Instead, rook c2. Now the point is, if black takes on e3 with the bishop, now just rook takes e3, and well, black cannot really take the queen on c4 because this one is also dropping, and then a7 is coming, and that's it. So instead, Topalov just dropped back to b6 to defend the pawn on c7. The bishop is quite well placed here. It's protected and it's keeping an eye on a7, so it's really stopping the white pawns on the queen side right now. Queen d3, rook a8, keeping an eye on that pawn, and here b4 would have been a nice move. The point is that it's preventing queen a4 from happening, since then obviously the rook is just hanging on e4. And also maybe white wants to connect the pawns with b5 and just keep everything protected, and black cannot take because of knight c2. So that would have been a nice move. Instead, Anand played king g2, just a useful move to play. But now queen a4, b3, and rook d4. And here I think it would have given white better chances to keep the queens on the board, in fact, with queen c2. For one, there's already a little trick here. If black decides to play a natural move, queen takes a6, there's knight f5. Very uncomfortable for black, and white is winning. Black cannot take, because of rook e8, and mate will soon occur. And if black doesn't take, but plays a move like rook d3, then there's knight e7 check, and suddenly the king feels quite uneasy. If the king goes to the h file, then the idea is like bring the rook over, and if the king goes to f8, then there's queen c6 and all kinds of ideas. Now moving the knight, bringing the rook to e8. Not good for black. So queen c2 might have been a better shot. Black can instead play queen b5. And now queen c6 takes. We also enter an endgame, but slightly better condition than what we'll see in the game. Still not easy to convert here, obviously, for white, even though white is better. So b takes a4, rook takes d3, knight c4, and rook takes a6. And we look at position, we notice black has come back. Black has won back the 2 pawns. He was down earlier in the game, but still chances for white. a5, first of all, it's nice. Black cannot take because of a pin here on the, oh, not this rook, the other rook. So it's not hanging on e1. And the bishop is dropping. So the bishop has to move. And the bishop should have moved to c5. And the reason is quite simple. So black keeps attacking this pawn on d5. And here, honestly, black is very, very close to equal. And with best play, this should result in a draw. White can still pose the most problems by playing rook e8, king h7, rook 1e7. That's what he did in the game too. But in the game, the bishop was on d4 and black couldn't take on d5. Here he can. Rook takes c7 and now rook f5. Defending the rook, the pawn on f7 and attacking a pawn on f2 at the same time. Rook e2 and bishop b4, and black will pick up this pawn on b4 and should be very close to drawing and equalizing here. So this was an excellent chance for Topalov to really come back completely. But instead he played bishop d4, which makes his task more difficult again. Now also rook e8 and rook 1e7. Now obviously black cannot take on d5, so he played rook c3. Knight d2. Knight d2 was an inaccuracy. Instead rook e4 was better, threatening checkmate and threatening the bishop. So bishop f6 is forced. Now rook f8, trying to get hold of this pawn. Still complicated, but it seems white has some good chances here to win this, even though not as good as it was early in the game. After knight d2, once again black is quite close to equalizing, and it was so important here to stop knight e4, the knight coming to e4, because the knight is just perfectly placed on e4, having an eye on knight g5 ideas and also preventing any bishop f6 defensive measures. So rook c2 was the final decisive mistake Topalov made here. Instead f5 was absolutely mandatory, and black can really be hopeful here for a draw. h4 now to prepare any knight f3, knight g5, and also just get a little closer to black king. But bishop f6, rook d7, now g5. Position remains highly difficult, complicated, but it seems with best play black has a decent shot at defending, because the bishop is just such a strong piece and the knight is not coming into such powerful action as it does in the game. So what happened in the game after rook c2? Well, suddenly white just starts a mating attack here, knight e4. The black pieces are all loose and uncoordinated, while the white pieces are ready to strike. The rooks are ready to double on the 8th rank and deliver checkmate, and there's just no way out for black. Best chance here still was g5, just to give the space to the king, but let's be honest, this will not be enough here. The white attack continues and black's not having any counterplay. So f6 was played because already here knight g5 is a very serious threat. Let's say rook takes a5, knight g5 check, king h8 and h4, followed by rook h8 and checkmate, rook takes f2. Doesn't change much. So f6, h4, rook takes a5, and now white just doubles on the 8th rank. Like I said, there's nothing black can do to stop him. g5, h5 continues to lock the black king in. Rook takes f2. Black has to take drastic measures to still keep playing, but Now with an exchange down here, it's just not enough, especially since the white attack is continuing. Still mate threat on h4, h8, excuse me, g4 check, king takes still the mate threat, so f5, black has to continue giving up pawns, and rook takes f5, and well, if the rooks come off, obviously white has no difficulty to convert, and if the rooks stay on the board, then just rook f8 back, and g6, rook e7, bishop g7, and rook ff7, and that's it, the bishop falls, and game over. Quite an exciting game for Anand in the first round. Just like in the candidates 2014, he starts with a win. Not as convincing as back then against Oronian, but still quite a good game by Anand, I would say. Topalov had several chances. First, he had a chance to go for the advantage with f6 when the queen was so awkwardly placed on c6. And then he had two chances to really come back and take a draw here, but he missed them, so he lost the first game, and Anand takes the lead with 1 out of 1, while all the other games were drawn. I hope you enjoyed this analysis, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.